What's going on, guys? Hope everybody's having a great day. Please do me a favor, smash that like button, and if you get anything from this content, consider subscribing. No matter what opinion we hold on the cases and news stories that we go over, we form that opinion based off of things that we have seen in the media. And some from police reports, right? But mostly reports from the media. I know sometimes we end up with very different opinions on cases, and that's good. That's how things should be in a free thinking society. I do, though, think that it's always important to remember where that information came from and why it's framed the way that it's framed. Different media outlets frame stories in a different light, and depending on what you heard first or what makes the most sense to you based off your own personal life experiences, you chose to view it the way that you did and have the opinion that you have. Regardless, though, you should never be fully decided until you have the full story with context. Justice for the victims isn't served until you have the right person or people punished for the crime that was committed. Without full context, it's literally impossible to understand how everything happened and why it happened. That's why it's very important to keep an open mind until you see everything for yourself, because this is our media.
Our greatest responsibility is to serve our
Treasure Valley communities.
We are extremely proud of the quality, balanced journalism that CBS 4 News produces.
But
we are concerned about troubling and irresponsible, one-sided news stories plaguing our country.
The sharing of biased and false news has become all too common on social media. More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Now, this is clearly a media empire trying to keep others from speaking about certain topics. 5 people on all of mainstream media. That means that you have 5 people at the top, and their point of view is used to influence the masses.
The sharing of biased and false
news has become all too common on social media.
More alarming, some media outlets publish these same fake stories without checking facts first.
Unfortunately, some members of the media use their platforms to push their own personal bias and agenda to control exactly what people think. And this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
Yes, of course, you have certain journalists who write their own stories, but those stories are turned in for selection. Management goes through those stories and decides what's okay to run or not to run. If it goes against their narrative, they're not going to run it.
So in this way, television news created a profound gap in the American public's trust in the government.
But when mass information is put out, it looks like this.
this is extremely dangerous to our democracy.
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 This is how media can be used to push an agenda. This particular agenda that they were speaking about in this clip is so that you don't take independent journalists or social media seriously. Now, we can all understand why it could be dangerous to listen to every Tom, Dick, and Harry on the internet's opinion and take that as the golden rule. But you shouldn't take that as the golden rule, and you shouldn't take the mainstream media's story as the golden rule either. You should always do your own research about a topic that you want to be informed about. You can't just listen to what other people say.
By 1792, the delivery of newspapers was subsidized by the government. And then came the radio in the late 19th and early 20th centuries. This became the first truly mass media since centralized stations could broadcast political debates and lots of other programming into people's homes. And it was President Franklin Roosevelt who was the first president to exploit this medium to its full political potential.
Mainstream media likes to paint all other media, especially social media, as below their standards. But the reality is mainstream media engages in the exact same things as people on social media do.
News consumption has become a manifestation of what they call the daily me. In other words, it is the individual news consumer which decides what news to consume and what news to ignore. Powered by robust algorithms, news aggregators on our phones and our social media now show us the news that we will like and that will keep us on their platform, not necessarily the news that we need to know, and certainly not the news that will challenge us.
These clips should show you, even your local news channel, as having things funneled down to them. Stories that they must run. They're called must-run stories. And those stories are basically written for them to read out to you. And the reason they do that is because your local journalist, your local news anchor, is part of the local community. They know that you will trust him more than you will these national news anchors. So they don't only have the national news anchors say it, but they send down must-runs to your local news agencies. Why would they do that?
If you wanted to come up with the perfect strategy for how to manipulate or warp the dialogue in America, if you were savvy about this, you would buy local affiliates in markets across the country, get into every major city, every region to communicate a message. And then if you can put that message in the mouths of hundreds of local anchors who have been on air for many, many years, that's a much better strategy.
It's because they want to influence what you hear. They want to shape the way that you think about the information being presented to you. When you're telling someone a story, you want them to see that story from your perspective. Well, that's what the mainstream media has become. The news was supposed to be emotionless and dull, generic. Absolutely nothing. They didn't even want their news anchors to have an accent. Back in the day, news was plain. Nowadays, though, they're all influencers. They're trying to influence your decisions.
The anchors, they are very well known in their communities. They tend to be active in charities. They show up for special events.
When you sign up for all these apps, like YouTube, they're going to use your own data against you to manipulate you. They're going to use marketing and ads to convince you to order things that otherwise you wouldn't have ordered. They're going to check you out, see who you are as a person, see what your history and your activity online is, and they're going to try to paint a profile of you, and then they're going to market items toward you that you're most likely to buy. Now, a lot of people try to look at that like it's a benefit, right? But when you have a big power trying to influence the general public, that's always a scary thing. When the media gives you a story in a certain light, you have to ask yourself, what is their goal? Do the facts from alternative media fit into this narrative, or does it contradict that narrative? And if you find contradictions, instead of choosing a side, go do your own research.
There's something particularly treacherous about taking these words from Sinclair's corporate headquarters and putting them in the mouths of journalists who are trusted to the point that now audiences can't tell whether or not the information they're consuming actually comes from these local journalists or if there's a giant corporate Goliath pulling the strings.
To pretend this isn't a real thing after we have proof and the government has admitted to doing this exact same thing before is voluntary blindness. The media is supposed to be a watchdog agency. They're supposed to hold the government accountable to the people.
Television actually played a huge role in the public's understanding and response to the Vietnam War. While Presidents Johnson and Nixon were telling the public how great it was going in Vietnam, television news reporters were on the ground over there showing the carnage and telling a much different story.
But instead, they're in bed with the government. The media is just another arm of the government at this point, and they're using it to influence us into doing what they want us to do, making decisions they want us to make. To pretend that they don't try to influence our other decisions also would be moronic. Our government is supposed to serve and protect us, but that only works if there's not some big ball up at the top where a few people control the money, and the money controls all the power. Absolute power corrupts absolutely. The government is the people, and we seem to have forgotten that. Government employees work for the people as a representative of the office that they hold. They're not celebrities. They shouldn't be trying to influence us into a perfect little mold that empowers them more and more but restricts us more and more. Just look at the connections between government and mainstream media, and I'll let you solve that puzzle for yourself. We have the most powerful people in the world who have direct personal influence over the biggest media agencies in the world. Not just news stations and newspapers, but entertainment also, music, movies, TV shows, pop culture. So who's in charge? The government or the people? Are the people still the government, or is the government above the people? Let me know what you think about it down in the comments below. Like the video, subscribe to the channel to see more, hit that notification bell so you'll get notified anytime I post. Have a great day, and we'll see you later.